I just can't see any scenario short of his assassination that ends up in Rogan not having 20 million viewers an episode in a year. As long as he's careful, like he is, I don't think Rogan can be canceled. So even if Spotify dumps him, it's like, who's dumping who here? Rogan, he's on Spotify. It's not necessarily. Spotify might be on Rogan. It's not so clear.
Jordan Peterson is speaking out in defense of Joe Rogan against attacks by the legacy media, but the joke is on them. We're going to find out precisely why Peterson believes the success of Joe Rogan proves that the days of the legacy media are indeed coming to an end. You're not going to want to miss this.
So the CNN people came after Joe Rogan. And
yes, did they? I didn't hear.
Yeah. And one of them said, essentially, man, what's going on here? We've got this whole bureau's devoted to fact checking and the truth, and all these experts hired, and why the hell aren't people listening to us when they listen to Joe Rogan and he's just winging it? And I thought, just winging it, eh? You try just winging it in front of 11 million people for 5 years and see if you're still standing, buddy. You think just winging it is so easy. Well, first of all, why aren't you doing it if it's so damn easy? And second, isn't it something that with all your resources, you can only garner like 1/10 of the audience of one man who has like zero production expertise in his studio. He just puts it all out online, and all he does is have honest conversations. I mean, insofar as he's capable of that. You know, Joe stumbles, and he knows that and admits it. And sometimes he gets too, buttoned down on a given point. But fundamentally, he's just trying to do what we're doing here.
All right, that's not fair. That ain't fair, Jordan. You should not be bringing up CNN's ratings. They're appalling, dismal, utterly catastrophic ratings. That's just kicking a man when he's down. It's just not fair. But of course, it's absolutely right. The tragic part for CNN is that they've tried to blend together two contradictory projects. They've tried to blend together what's called advocacy journalism with an old, outdated, obsolete concept of journalistic objectivity. So going in reverse order, the original concept of journalistic objectivity came at the beginning of the 20th century when journalists adopted what they considered scientific modes of investigation in their reporting. It's very interesting because media historians note that before that, papers and magazines were unapologetic advocates for very specific political parties and positions, very much like talk radio today. But beginning in the early 1930s, primarily as a way to escape the influence and coercion of corrupt politicians, journalists began turning increasingly towards scientific rationalism as the key methodology behind their reporting, which sought to analyze events objectively and impartially, irrespective of the preconditions of the reporter. And so that gave rise to the notion of journalistic objectivity. But of late, journalists have increasingly turned back, ironically, to the notion of advocacy journalism, where journalistic endeavors are deliberately reconfigured around political aims and goals. In other words, journalists today are very much dedicated to intentionally pushing a singular partisan viewpoint, very left-wing normally. But here's the problem. Rather than just admit that, rather than just say, yeah, this whole objective journalistic enterprise, we're done with it. We don't buy it no more. We know we all got our biases and our partisan bents, so we're just going to go with those bents. Rather than just be upfront with what they're doing, the legacy media has actually attempted to continue to portray themselves as objective journalists. All the while, they brazenly embrace advocacy journalism, which is the explicit rejection of journalistic objectivity. So in my view, therein lies the fundamental reason why trust in the legacy media has absolutely imploded. They've effectively become a performative contradiction, and fewer people take them seriously. Enter Joe Rogan. Now, here's a guy who's inquisitive. He wants to learn about the world. He invites informed guests on a number of topics to converse about the world. He shares his opinions, but he always demonstrates an openness to reconsider other explanations. And tens of millions of people find themselves enriched and illuminated by these 2, 3, 4-hour podcast discussions. And they find that they walk away far more edified and far more informed than from anything they get from a bunch of far-left activists trying to disguise themselves as objective journalists, say, over at CNN. And the fact that CNN is utterly livid over this just confirms for these tens of millions how much CNN is not worthy of their time. But there's something even deeper going on here that Jordan Peterson puts his fingers on.
Part of me now thinks, hey, keep at it, guys. Every time you attack him, 1 million more subscribers for Joe. They kick him off Spotify. He would have a new platform like in 2 days with twice as many listeners. And so Joe's got to the point where as long as he continues to be careful, and he is being, I don't think he can be canceled. In fact, I think all the attempts to cancel him only redound to his credit and increase the rapidity with which he's destroying the entire legacy media.
Did you hear that? That was fascinating. According to Peterson, this is key, Rogan is destroying the entire legacy media. The legacy media is being destroyed. Something's happening here. There's a seismic shift that's happening that the legacy media is not surviving. And that's what Jordan Peterson identifies next.
Well, the only real rationale for opposing free speech, apart from ignorance, which is that you don't know that free speech isn't just another right and you don't know it's indistinguishable from thought, is the conclusion that you've already figured it all out. So you don't have to think.
Or you're
anymore.
trying to hide something.
Well, that's the other possibility. But those two things go hand in hand very frequently, is that it's very often that people who are trying to hide something justify that to themselves with a kind of totalitarian certainty about their beliefs. They double down on them to hide their own moral iniquities. And so you have to believe that people like Rogan shouldn't be allowed to just have a discussion with whoever they want and wing it. And you think that because you think you already know. And, if your life is perfect and you're already living in the kingdom of God, and then more power to you, maybe you're right. And you can shut down free discourse because the heavenly heights have already been scaled. But I haven't met anyone like that yet. Most people I know think with not too much thought that there's some things they still have to learn and some ways their lives could be improved. And how are we going to approach that? Especially, you want to find out how you're wrong. You should talk to people who don't agree with you. Now, maybe 90% of what they say is not worth attending to, could easily be. Probably the same goes for you. But 10% might be just what saves you in the next crisis.
Now, what Jordan Peterson is getting at there, I think, big picture, is the fact that the legacy media seems completely oblivious to the fact that we're now living in what's called the information age. We often refer to it as the network society here on this channel. And this is the rising new social order where the legacy media is no longer the gatekeeper of information. Through the rise of the internet, information has been radically democratized. It's been decentralized away from monopolistic industries like CBS and NBC and ABC, and it's now available to everyone through digital networks, primarily the internet. And in such a world, we're able to experience information in a manner that transcends the interpretive frames of the legacy media. The problem is that instead of trying to persuade consumers of information that their frames for interpreting information are superior, the legacy media ends up trying to silence and censor alternative frames, alternative narratives, alternative interpretations of the vast information that we encounter on a daily basis, irrespective of the legacy media. Now, of course, the challenge for all of us is determining whom we can trust. What constitutes reliable information? That is a complex issue in a network society. But that complexity is not solved by old, outdated gatekeepers actively attempting to censor so-called disinformation, especially when those gatekeepers keep getting caught lying incessantly about things like Russian collusion that never happened, or knowingly censoring legitimate information such as the Hunter Biden laptop. So all of this is to say that Jordan Peterson recognizes that we're entering into a new era, an information age, where people like Joe Rogan are far better positioned to navigate that age than a bunch of bloated, overfunded, and increasingly outdated media institutions that belong to days long gone by. The era of the legacy media is indeed over. The era of the information age is just beginning. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You will definitely want to check out my latest video on a woke college student getting absolutely stunned silent when she heard this from a conservative speaker. You got to check it out to find out. You're not going to want to miss it. So click on that link and I'll see you over there. God bless.